Okay, so good morning, an official good morning, and welcome to Kabbalah Café. So I wrote in the email, which apparently some of you guys did not see. Thumbs up if you saw the email. You saw the email? You guys saw the email? Okay. All right. Not everyone saw the email. Yeah, it always gets somehow it always gets sent out right before Shabbos. But anyway, I wrote the email and I wrote it about a friend of mine who likes to call himself Mr. Nobody. I'm telling now, this is legit. If you meet him and you say, hey, what's your name? He'll say, me, I'm Mr. Nobody. And it's like kind of his shtick. It's kind of funny. He's a funny guy. But he happens to be a very accomplished human being. He's an accomplished business person. He's an accomplished community leader. He has done a lot of good in this world. And he likes to call himself Mr. Nobody because his motto is that when you do good, it doesn't have to be about you. You do good, that's it. Stay under the radar. Thank you. Under the radar. Yeah, he obviously works very hard. He does a lot of good, and he's like, he's gonna stay under the radar, Mr. Nobody. Now, I guess it would be one could ask if by calling himself Mr. Nobody, if that paradoxically actually attracts more attention. Say, oh, who is this nobody? Let's get to know why he's calling himself nobody, and then you get who thinks, yeah, look who thinks he's nobody. Right? However, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'll tell you why. In the Chabad Hasidic tradition, there is a quality that you will hear. Like if you go to Farbrengens, and when I say Farbrengens, I mean like kind of old school Chabad Farbrengens, like late night Farbrengens. You might hear the conversation focus on an idea called bittul. What is bittul? Bittul is self-abnegation. Good. So that is the typical translation of bittul, self-abnegation, which in, I guess, the average or normal English would mean the idea of, well, hold on, Oded, how would you translate bittul? Bitul. Cancellation. Cancel. Chabad is into canceling. I'm kidding. So this is not canceling someone else. Not even canceling self. Bitul is the quality of, what's a good, such not, what? Yeah. Humility, being humble, but it's more than that. It's a level of almost self-transparency where you take up as little to no space as possible. You don't get in the way. It's not, you don't make it about you. You make it about, let's say, the moment.
Oh, is bittul like being a conduit?
Conduit, yeah, could be a conduit. Yes. But I will say it's when bittul is used as a quality that we should aspire to, it's not necessarily so much about being a conduit, even though that's what happens when you get out of the way, but it's really about the act of getting out of the way, which then one becomes a conduit, because if you're out of the way, then there's no resistance. It's like cables, right? You're wiring up a high fidelity audio system, as one does on the weekends. So you want to use, ideally, cables that have the least amount of resistance. Maybe gold cables or whatever. I don't know, whatever is the latest and greatest stuff. So you want to use stuff. Hey, Matt, good to see you. You want to use stuff, and hey, Frank, you want to use the stuff that has the least resistance to the audio sound coming through. Why? Because you want the cable to get out of the way. You don't want to hear the cable. Oh, I'm a cable. Cables are not overrated. The best cable is the one that gets out of the way. By the way, we've talked about this before. It's also true with the human body. When you feel the body, it's usually not always, but it's usually not a good sign. It's like you don't want to feel your hand. You want your hand to be, again, I don't know what the right word is. Transparent. It's not a good word, because that would be weird. It's like, oh, look, wait, what? No, but you want your hand to be invisible. You want it to get out of the way. In other words, you want it to do its thing, but not say, oh, look, I'm a hand, right? It's like when you're shooting a 3-point shot in basketball, you don't want to be in your head and in your hand and your motion. Oh, I'm shooting it. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. It has to be like smooth. You don't want to think about walking while you're walking. If you think about it, if you ever have that experience where you're going down the stairs and you start thinking about the stairs or looking at the stairs, and the next thing you know, you're like, whoa, stairs, right? Meanwhile, I don't know, maybe that just comes with age. But the idea is that, you know, with when we focus too much on something and something is not batal, it's actually a sign of the absence of health. Health is this idea of transparency. So I'm going to share with you a few stories. Yes. Oh, so Sam is asking the question: any connection between bittul and tzimtzum? So I would say like this: tzimtzum is also getting out of the way, where Hashem gets out of the way to allow existence to emerge, as the mystics explain. One of the just mind-blowing ideas of Kabbalah is this idea of tzimtzum. And bittul is also getting out of the way. I would say there's overlapping. I don't know that they're perfectly interchangeable. Like if you talk about, you know, like the avodah of bittul, like, you know, like to work on, you know, bittul within oneself to become a little bit, you know, less, you know, ego driven, a little bit less about. I don't know if you interchange that with tzimtzum, but I think conceptually they do overlap. And it's a similar concept, but it's not necessarily, you know, perfectly interchangeable, just in the way, maybe just in the way that it's used. Maybe. Right. Maybe it's too much, so we call it bittul. But you're right. Maybe it's the same. You know, the human application of tzimtzum is maybe bittul. Yeah, it could be in the flow, getting out of the way. So, like Mr. Nobody, the concept is that you're just in the flow. So here's the story. It's a true story. It happened in Russia back in the day, where there was a chassid, Chabad guy coming. Take a seat anywhere. Make yourself comfortable. And remind me again your first name. Ivan, and this is Ivan's first Kabbalah class, so welcome. We don't have an official first-time Kabbalah greeting, but we should. I'm thinking we probably should do that. Anyway, so here's the story. So a fellow, so it's in Russia. There was a Farbrengen. Now, if you know Farbrengens, there's some that are Farbrengens and there's some that are Farbrengen. I mean, some that are like really next level Farbrengens that go deep into the night, right? Go late at night. And so this is one of those that went deep into the night. It ended, I don't even know what time. I don't remember from the original story, but I'm assuming 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is during the days of communism, right? The early days of communism. And so this chassid walks out of the Farbrengen and he is on a high. I would assume on multiple levels after a little bit of schnapps or vodka. He's in the flow. But it's after Farbrengen, and he is spiritually, but really, with that all joking aside, he's spiritually like just in an incredible space. And there's a Russian, I don't know, police officer. I don't think it was like the KGB, a police officer that says, and the way the story is told is actually using the Russian words. I don't know Russian, so you know I don't remember the original term, but it's the Russian policeman asked this Chabad chassid, you know, early morning, says, "Who goes there?" Something along those lines, like who's going? The chassid, I know what the chassid answered in Yiddish. He said, "Bittul gate." No, it sounds like a scandal. Bittul gate. No, that's Yiddish. It's not a scandal. That's not like Watergate gate. It's not like right. Not Bittul Gate either. The founder of Microsoft. No, this is Bit Gate in Yiddish could also mean goes. Bittul Gate. He said, who's going there? Who goes there? He says, Bittul goes. In other words, he identified as Bittul. Now, it wasn't a no. No, it's right. He had a good comeback, but that was the last thing. No, so he it wasn't just a line that he said, it wasn't just something cute that he said. He was really like in that zone of really getting out of the way. They tell another story. I'll tell you another Hasidic story. I wish I remembered or looked up these stories before. But there was a chassid, I forget, he was like in the earlier generations of Chabad, maybe a chassid even of the Alter Rebbe, like the founder of Chabad, but he was in the first, early days of Chabad, also back in Russia. And he was a businessman. So he was a chassid and a businessman. And he actually ran a pretty successful business. I think he ran maybe a lumber business. I mean, makes sense. When you have some Russian forests nearby. And one year, it was the end of year kind of accounting, maybe end of quarter, whatever it is. He was tallying up, tallying up the profits and losses and making a cheshbon, making an accounting. And at the end, he writes, after all the numbers, he writes 3 words. Ein oid milvado, which is nothing other than God. It's like, after all is said and done, what's the bottom line? Only Hashem is true. Really, Hashem is the only truth that there is. Yes, he calculated the other numbers as well, as the Rebbe points out about this story. It's not like he didn't pay attention to the numbers. He paid attention to the numbers. And yet, even when paying attention to the numbers, knowing exactly what came in and what went out, he still recognized that even in that moment, Hashem is in control and he's not. I think that is a quality of bittul. Right? A quality of bittul is where you recognize that Hashem is in control. And I would say it's an existential state of profound humility. So I think humility is probably the best word we have in English, to surrender, humility. But it's not just humility. It's a profound state of humility. Bittul is like through and through humility. And it's not like it's a constant state, and it comes and goes, but it's something that certainly would be worth striving for. Exactly. Yes. So let me repeat that. So Sam is saying what it says about Moses. In the Torah, it says in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, that Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth. Is that related? The answer is 100%. In fact, thank you for saying that, because it reminds me of something else that it says in Deuteronomy. Now we know, just to quickly preface this, I think it's an important insight. We know that the book of Devarim, the 5th book of the Torah, is written found fundamentally different than all the other 4 books of the Torah. Stylistically, the other 4 books of the Torah, it's interesting, are written, the voice of the text is a narrator, like a third-party narrator that is like, I don't know what the right word in literature is, but it's like this all-knowing narrator. Omnipotent narrator. Omnipotent narrator, thank you. So it's like, in the beginning, God created the world. Well, who's saying that? It doesn't say in the beginning, I created the world. It's not like God is speaking. In the beginning, I created the world. No, it says in the beginning, God created the world. Who's talking? AI, right? Exactly. Right. Artificial intelligence. Right. So in the beginning, God created the world. And then it says, and God created Adam. And then Adam did this. And God did this, said to this Adam. And then Abraham comes along. And God says to Abraham, Lech lecha go. And Abraham goes. And you have this, the first 4 books of the Torah, Moses comes along. Hashem speaks to Moshe, tells him to take the people out, tells the narrative. It's all a narration, right? This omnipotent narrator that's telling us about God, about humankind, about the heroes and the villains, and who's narrating? Again, it's a voice from outside almost. Okay. The 5th book of Torah is different. The book of Devarim switches almost entirely into first-person voice. And whose voice? Moses' voice. He says, and then God said to me, and I said to you, he's speaking to the people. The book of Devarim primarily takes place over the last 37 days of Moshe's life, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat until Zayin Adar when he passed away. From the first day of Shvat until the 7th day of Adar, 37 days of his conversation, his admonition, his encouragement, his final charge, his last lecture, whatever you want to call it, to his people that he loved so dearly. 37 days of encouragement and chizuk. And he speaks in the first person, right? And he says, God said this to me. And then I said this to you. And then you messed up. And God was angry. So I had to speak to God. It's all first person. The 5th. So 1 second. Before you ask that question, let me make it even stronger. So the Shema that we know and love is in the middle of this book of Deuteronomy. Okay? What does it say in Shema? Hear, O Israel. The opening line says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is Our God, the Lord is one. Okay, well, that Moshe could say, he could say that, right? Hero of Israel. He's telling the people, listen up, right? God, talking about God, all that's fine. But you know where it gets a little crazy? The second paragraph. V'hayim Shema. And then it says, if you listen, right, then all these good things are going to happen. And if you listen, Nasati Esav, V'sadcha levamtecha, and I will give grass. I will give the grass in your fields for your animals. Who's the I? Who's the I? So the sages say the following. It's Moses speaking, but it's the voice of God. Shechina medab. This is classic Medrash, Gemara, the classic Jewish understanding. Shechina medaberet mitoch grono shel Moshe. It's the divine presence speaking through the voice, through the throat, right, of Moshe. So he was speaking. And so sometimes he speaks in the first person, but other times he will speak as if, as it were, almost as the voice of God. So, well, that's the thing. So first person in that book switches. Sometimes it's Moshe speaking first person. Sometimes he switches into speaking on behalf almost as God. So it's kind of wild, but it's all Moshe's, I don't know, dialogue or monologue. It's all him speaking. But again, he says, "V'nasati Esav, I will give grass, seed, whatever. I will give, the stuff to grow in your field." The point of this is that when you talk about Moshe being humble, and what that means is that bittul, if we translate bittul as this profound ability to get out of the way and channel something greater than self, then the answer is yes. There's none greater than Moses in this regard, none greater than him getting out of the way. Pat, I hate to be the bearer of, I love to be the bearer of amazing news. Passover is coming, right? Passover is coming. Hey, good morning. Good to see you. I was in Kroger. I must have been there maybe Thursday. They were setting up the one in City Springs, the larger kosher one. They're setting up the section. It's ready to go. Their Passover stuff is coming. So here's the thing. When you think about Passover and you think about the Seder and you think about the Haggadah, and you and I know this because it's like a famous anomaly. Moshe's name is not mentioned. It's unbelievable. You go through a whole Seder. Once he's mentioned. There's a verse that's quoted by Yamina Ba'Hashem of Moshe Avdo, right? As part of the psukim, part of the verses that are mentioned at the Seder. But within the narrative of here's what happened. We were slaves. Avodim hayinu, right? We were slaves. And then there's no mention of Moshe. No mention. And the commentaries, I will say, one of the most commented upon books in Jewish thought is the Haggadah. Sam, how many commentaries are there on the Haggadah? 30. You're saying you have. Yeah. But how many are there total? Hundreds, if not thousands, of commentaries. Why? It's it's great. It's a self-contained book. It's about our national history and destiny. It's a great, if you want to comment and write ideas, Haggadah is a great place to start, to be like a commentary. Yeah. Sure.
Aaron did a lot of his talking for him.
To Pharaoh. After that, right, so Aaron was his spokesperson only in Egypt. Once they got out, at that point, Moses, it seems, has no problem talking and being the go-between. It seems like he cleared up all the, whether that was like an actual physical one or more of a humility, also like not, then, so he, from that point on, from after the Exodus, we don't find that Aaron really does much speaking on Moshe's behalf.
Was it Moses arguing with God for like a week?
Yes, a full week.
So there's a lot more arguments that he used that we didn't see.
No, the Torah says. Yeah. Well, the Torah mentions like 5 or 6, but you're saying if it went a whole week, there was probably more. Like, and I'm late for baseball. Right. I don't know. Right. I don't know the extent of all those, of all the pieces. But anyway, the idea. But getting back to the Haggadah, So there's tons of commentaries and tons of reasons offered as to why Moshe's name is not mentioned at the Seder. I remember seeing one answer, and that is that the creators of the Haggadah, from the creators of the Haggadah, anyway, the ones who composed the Haggadah, so they thought that if they would mention Moshe, if they would make too much of a big deal about him, it would take away from kind of the acknowledgement of God's miracles, and it would take away from that. It would be too much about a Moshe. And I always thought that was a curious answer. But then I don't know. It's like the first time I encountered it, I was like, oh, interesting. I don't know if that's the answer that I would go to as my go-to answer. But I also think that it represents something pretty profound. In other words, that even Moshe would have said, as it were, like, don't make it about me. Don't make it about me. Yes, I was the go-between, but going back to what Yaakov just said about Moshe for 7 days saying, I don't want this job. I don't want to. Moshe was never looking for the glory. He was never looking at this position to be the face, to be the voice, to be the one that everyone talks about for, forever. Like, oh, Moses took us out of Egypt. It was never about Moses. He never made it about himself. He always made it about God. Yeah.
But didn't he want to lead the people to Israel?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. He did want to lead them to Israel, but I don't know that that was so much about him as it was about, he also wanted to go. He also, but the
children of Israel too.
right. So first of all, that was part of the original mandate. Second of all, so maybe you wanted to see that through. Second of all, no, but I understand. No, Larry, I think Larry's asking even to go a little bit deeper in your question. Right. No, I think, right. And just,
We don't know where he's buried.
it's not about him. We don't make a shrine. We don't make it into a destination where he's buried. But to your point, it's like, right, God says you're not going in and he's pushing. And so I think your question is, well, when you're pushing, that means you're pushing your agenda, because God already stated his agenda. God's agenda is you're not going in. If he still pushes, is that Bittul or is that Moshe? It's a good question. I don't have a good answer. It's a good
But
question.
so Rabbi, what would be the difference in that scenario versus when Hashem was ready to ditch us because we made the golden calf and Moses intervenes and says, then take me, I don't want any of this Torah if that's what you're going to do. So it seems like he did push at that point. So
Good question.
how is that different?
Good. This is great. This is why we like Kabbalah Café conversation. New ideas are coming up. This is good. That's very good. So, and that was actually yesterday's Torah portion. When Moses says to God, he puts down the ultimatum, the ultimate ultimatum. He says, God, forgive the people. If not, take me out of your book, right? I don't want any part of this, right? Just find someone else because I don't want any part of this. So I would say like this. I would say that's a good point / question. The way it's explained in Chassidus, Kabbalah, is that wasn't Moshe asserting his own ego. That was him being the ultimate leader and the ultimate representative of the people. In fact, if it was about him and his identity, he would never have said, take me out of the Torah. Why? Because that's his identity. Like his claim to fame is his association with Torah. We call it Torah Moshe. It's the Torah of Moses. It's the Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Moses is the one who got the Torah from Sinai and gave it to us. He's the one who went up the mountain 40 days, 40 nights. If his willingness to surrender all that is almost like him saying that the people that I represent, the people that I lead, are more important than me. And the truth is, I might say that maybe even kind of, again, I don't know that, I think the word answer is the wrong thing. I don't know that there are any answers, but a perspective. Maybe it's also a perspective on Moses kind of fighting, as it were, to go into Israel. Maybe it's not about him there. Maybe God says, and I think this is what Dr. Maxey is saying, that the two are intertwined, the two are connected thematically. It's like, it's not that Moses is saying, I want to go in to Israel, or I want to, battle God and be right. It's not about Moses, it's about the people. Knowing that, believing that the people need a leader and believing that he was, granted this opportunity. Maybe it's him just really fighting on behalf of the people. There are commentators that say that his wanting to go into Israel was because of the opportunities that are in Israel to do a mitzvot that you cannot do outside of Israel. Certain mitzvot, a number. In fact, I think most of the positive commandments are specifically tied into Israel. So, but again, is that ego? I want to do a mitzvah, or is that bittul? A mitzvah needs to get done through me. I mean, it's a different way of how you. Yeah. Hard to let go of your children. Right. And that a good point. You have a good point. And is that ego, or is that the ultimate care for the children? Right. You could look at it both. Right. I think that it always comes, it's so subtle. That line is so subtle, because when does it cross over into, oh, well, that's the person not being able to let go. It's a person not being able to see like the handwriting on the wall, or that's their ego. It's like, I'm just thinking lahavdil, like to create a huge line of separation, but like professional athletes that don't know when to retire, right? It's like they play and play and play. Hey, they play and play and play. And then, by the time they're done, they're no good anymore, right? It's like, you should have retired 5 years ago. You would have went out like a hero. Now you're going out. You would have went out like the goat. Now you're going out like a goat. Right, and that's different. Hey, good to see you. Right, yeah.
Maybe the fact that Moses is not mentioned in the Haggadah is the same reason as God is not mentioned in the book of
Megillah.
Esther. So it's not about Moses. It's not about Moses. It's not about God. It's more about, if you want to save yourself, don't rely on man or God yet, because you still have to take the first steps, even if you want God's help.
Interesting.
It's about you. So
Interesting.
It's not about a savior. You have to save yourself before the savior is going to come and save you.
You're saying it's about
10%. You have to do 10%.
You're saying it's like I just want to repeat it so that everyone can hear. So the idea of the Megillah, we're coming up to Purim in a few weeks. The idea of the book of Esther not having the name of God and not saying clearly that God saved the Jewish people, even though it's kind of obvious that that's what's going on. And the Haggadah not mentioning Moses is maybe that it's not about God or Moses, although it is certainly about God, but it's also the message is about us and what we need to do, and not relying on that sort of thing, but making sure to do the effort. I like that also. Yeah.
The fact that Moses had to talk to God in order for God to forgive us, that doesn't reflect so well on God.
Oh,
Moses.
good question. Let me repeat that. Okay, good. So Toba is asking a question. If Moses has to argue with God to forgive the Jewish people, what kind of God is that? That doesn't like forgiveness? So I will share. Again, that's a great question. The question might be better than the response that I'll give, but I'll give a response anyway. Because in Chassidus, in Kabbalah, it says that the power of teshuvah is specifically that it comes from the person. In other words, if it comes from above, then it's still not you. Then see how to conceptually present this. As long as it's coming from above, then the person, it's a gift, and because of that, it would never really transform the person. In other words, what's the concept of teshuvah? It's that the person went into a place where they shouldn't have gone, right? A negative place, and what's required now is a complete transformation. That the idea of a complete transformation can only happen from the inside out, not from the outside in. I feel like today is a bit of a farbrengen. I will say, I started off with a story about a farbrengen, but I feel like even the energy, which is good. I like this energy. No, not. It's a little early. It's a little for me. So no. But there's a Hasidic story. I just want to share one story, and then there's a Hasidic. Here is a story that's told that would be told at Farbrengens. I heard this many times at Farbrengens. They say that when you have is it a goat or a sheep? I don't know. One of the two. Maybe a sheep. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Hey, Anthony, thank you for breakfast, Anthony. The red thing. He told me about it. I didn't. All right. Put that on your bucket list, folks. Thank you.
And the question is,
No bacon.
One bacon. Well, bacon, that's a standard. But.
No, they like breakfast.
We, maybe that's what it means, we have an idea, we could be busy and sit on Sunday morning.
That's sausage.
I've been putting the hands of the city.
That's fine. Whatever you have is good. Sausage and onions, you know, there's different kinds of.
So you have one, so yeah, I think it might be a mix, might be hit or miss. Maybe we can, all right, we'll talk after. Okay, so getting back to, I think it's a goat. You can, if you're a farmer, again, a lot of the Hasidic stories are like, go back to the old country. So a lot of it, because people had farms, they goes back in Russia, this is the way things rolled. So you had a goat, you're cleaning your goat. You can clean and scrub your goat from today to tomorrow, and you're not gonna get the goat fully clean. That's the nature of the goat or the sheep. I'm not sure which one. Right.
Probably the sheep.
Maybe sheep. Okay, sheep. Oh,
Yeah,
good. Sheep.
It's like this much.
Perfect. Even better.
Wool.
Perfect. So better. So the sheep, let me start again. You can clean the sheep. You can do a deep shampoo of your sheep. You go in with a bissel, one of those, the bistles, like the carpet vac situation. You go with a carpet vac and you're only going to get what you get. But then with one shake, I don't know, this is the way the story goes. If the animal, right, gives a shake, all the stuff inside goes out. In other words, there's only so much that can be done from the outside in. The real cleaning, the real cleansing, as it were, happens from the inside out. So in other words, tshuva, so to your question, tshuva had to come from Moses fighting for it. If God says, you messed up, here's what you need to do, that would still be God. That would still be more God. God said to do it, we didn't do it. God says, don't serve idols, we served idols. God says, well, then do this. And then we either do or don't do that. But it's still more of the same. There's nothing fundamentally that's changed. The fact that the first instance that we find of tshuva in the Torah is where a human being has to fight for it. Moses has to fight for it. Moshe Rabbeinu petitions God and says, no, you have to open up this path. It's because tshuva, by definition, has to come from the person. It's to be something we're fighting for. We have to fight for it. If we didn't fight for it, it means we're still in the same place. I mean, think about it in a human relationship. Somebody does something that's hurtful to the one that they love. So you would expect them to come at this from a place of real brokenness. Like, I really messed up. I'm broken. If the other person says, all right, well, here's what you can do to fix this. Is it really fixed? Is it ever fixed? Do you know that person cares enough to fix it? When you see them fighting for it, fighting for the relationship, now you know it's real. Now you know it means something. But Toby, you wanted to continue.
See that.
No worries.
I don't see that there was any teshuva on the part of Moses or the people. Moses just said, you better, it was a threat, you better, where was the teshuva?
Good.
All the trees.
So 1 second. So good. Look, the golden calf is a very tricky episode. There are many details, moving parts in the story. So number one, clearly Moses is advocating. He is hustling for this tshuva opportunity. Number one. Number two, the people that were directly involved did not end up surviving. But number three, the Jews embarked on a national project as part of their tikkun, as part of their repair. And that was building the Mishkan. That was literally so what does that tshuva look like? Tshuva looks like, when you talk about rebuilding a relationship, they literally built, a relationship through the donation and the construction of the Mishkan. That was their practical work that they were doing. Excellent questions. Shayna, you have a question?
Sorry, I had to unmute. So I was going to say, I would think God knows Moshe was going to say that about the Jewish people. And maybe that was him showing he's like us and he's a leader of us.
Nice.
And the other thing was, if somebody doesn't realize they've wronged you and you give them forgiveness, they don't even know what they've done. So I understand your sheep analogy, and that's fantastic. But again, if somebody apologizes and they don't even know what they did, it's kind of pointless.
Correct. You're saying that tshuva has to be genuine. When you say sorry, you have to really know what you're saying sorry for. 100%. That's why it has to come from the person. The person has to own it. The person has to really have, look, teshuva, the way Rambam codifies it in halacha, tshuva is not a magical a button that you press. You press the tshuva button and you're forgiven. It got brighter, didn't it? Yeah. That's great. Sun is out. All right. Now things are heating up. So tshuva is not a magic button. Tshuva is literally acknowledging the wrong, owning the mistake, committing to not do it again. There's all these steps with regard to tshuva, and then, confessing the vidur, confessing the sin verbally, as it were. So there's a lot of layers to it. It's not just simply like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna, I apologize, forgive me. It's way deeper than that. All of this is this, yeah. You know what? It's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, it talks about tshuva. One level is tshuva meira, and one is tshuva me'ava. Tshuva meira is tshuva from a state of fear, I guess. Even the last week we said that tshuva, that year is not fear, but tshuva meira is tshuva from fear, which is that you're afraid of punishment or afraid of what you've done wrong. And so you get your act together because kind of motivated by fear. It's like kind of like, when negative consequences start coming and someone's like, oh, I messed up. I got to fix this. But it's born of kind of that fear, as opposed to tshuva me'ava is a tshuva that comes from a space of love. Like I love so deeply that I want to get back into a good place. It's like, and that the Talmud says, the Gemara says that tshuva transforms the sins into mitzvot, the mistakes into the pshayim, zdonot, not pshayim, zdonot, which means the wanton sins, the willing sins, to zechuyot, to mitzvot. Because it turns out that the love that I have for God today is precisely born of the mistake that I made yesterday, which means that the mistake is actually the greatest thing that ever happened. That's how to flip. That's how to flip it, right? If we can not only learn from our mistakes, boom, right? The love that I feel, let's say a person, neglects a relationship and it goes into a negative place and then realizes, oh no, can't believe what I've done. But because of that, they're motivated to invest, right? Not only to not do that again, but to invest in the relationship with a greater, a greater degree than ever before. Had they not made the mistake, turns out the mistake was the greatest thing that ever happened. So that's kind of how we can almost revisit the past and redefine it. This moment, this was a moment, this was a thing that happened in the timeline of our lives. This thing happened. Was that a bad thing or a good thing? Turns out we can decide that later on. The way we live our lives can decide whether that was a pitfall or whether that was a catalyst to something greater. That's the power of teshuvah, to redefine the past. Teshuvah is not just there's two levels of teshuvah. One level of teshuvah is, right, tikkun. One level of teshuvah is, from now on, I'll be in a good place. But a deeper level of teshuvah is going back to the past, to redefine the past, that even the past, that moment was not a bad moment. I mean, not that it was a good thing that I did, but it didn't lead to bad. It led to something much greater. That is the real power of teshuvah.
That kind of opened my eyes because I don't know why I didn't see it, but you said that the Mishkan was a whole redemption project.
Yes,
And that
literally.
And the thing that Rebbe said probably that impressed me the most was, he said the breaking of the second tablets, he says that was not a mistake. And the fact that the Jews messed up was not a mistake. He says, because the breaking of the second tablets.
You mean the first tablets?
The breaking of the first tablets is every human life. He said, you think something happened and there was a crisis and it was a bad thing. But every human life this is the paradigm. Every single life is like this. We have a perfect childhood. That's the first tablets and that's received, but it's not sustainable because we didn't create it. And then the breaking of tablets is like, okay, you were supposed to lose that. And then now the second tablets that Moses actually carved and then God made the lettering into, that was sustainable because we had a part in it.
Yep.
He said, but that every human life has a breaking point. And then when the second half of your life that you actually recreate, that's sustainable. And that's actually supposed to happen because then you can be part of recreating yourself.
And just to repeat and make sure that everybody heard that. So the idea of the tablets and the cycle of first tablets and then breaking the first tablets and the second tablets emerging kind of from the people is that, from the Moses kind of carves it, is that, we are given things from above. And the idea is almost that those things have to break and shatter and be destroyed before we can really, right? Like anything that's from the outside in is not going to be as as real and as authentic as something that comes from the inside out. And I think all of this, to kind of close this loop, all of this goes back to the question about forgiveness and the question about, the role of Moses in this forgiveness and why he has to petition God. Why does it have to come from him? Why can't it come from God? Because I guess the answer, kind of using your terminology, Yaakov, the answer to that is, well, if you don't need tshuva from God, you already got the commandments from God, and you already broke that. You want more stuff from God to break? you want God to also say about tshuva, and then you're not going to do that either? It's like you already got the stuff from God, and y'all broke it already. So now what? So now you have to figure out a plan. At this point, it's not like, let me give you more stuff. It's almost like, investing. I invested and the investor lost all the money. Well, so let me get more money. Well, that's silly. It's like, now, so what are you going to do about it? Right? It's like, I already gave you what I gave you. Now, what are you going to do about it? It's almost like Moses has to be the one to discover, to open up this new channel. He has to fight for it on behalf of the Jewish people. Okay. And I want to share one more story. And this story is a story from the Talmud, a story that we've shared before, but I think also fits into this context of bittul, right? Today's topic is bittul, this idea of self-abnegation, this idea of getting out of the way, this idea of self-transparency. In the times of the Second Temple, in the times of the Second Temple, there were many great rabbis who lived toward the end of that era. And one of them, his name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is famous as the one who saved Torah at the time. He petitioned Vespasian, who was the Roman general, and later on shortly thereafter became the Roman emperor. He petitioned him that even as the temple would be destroyed, he petitioned him to save, to set aside a city of Yavne, city in Israel, a place for Judaism and Torah to be rebuilt, even sans the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, which really marked the transition from temple-centric Judaism to what I would say have Torah will travel-centric Judaism, the type of Judaism that we've had for the last almost nearly 2,000 years. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Talmud says, was on his deathbed later on, after the story, obviously. He's on his deathbed and he's crying. And his students ask him, they say, why are you crying? And he says, I'm crying because Eini Yodea, again, something we've discussed before. I just want to kind of reset the story. Eini Yodea, but Eza Derech Me'alichin Oisi. I do not know which path they are taking me. He's about to die. And he's basically saying, I don't know where I'm going to go. What does that mean? It means, right? I don't know. Am I going to go up, the up elevator to heaven, or the down elevator to the opposite? I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know which path they're going to take me. Okay. And so the students, that's a response to the students, and then there's a dialogue that ensues. But let's hold the dialogue aside for a moment, and let's ask the question. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was one of the greatest scholars of his time. He was a righteous man. He was the person who, on the ground, at least facilitated the saving of Torah Judaism as we know it today. He was the one that was so important, such a critical scholar, leader, community advocate in his time. How did he not know where he's going to go? I mean, come on. If anybody was a clear, like when, again, lahavdil, when athletes retire, the big question is, are they a Hall of Famer? If anybody was a first ballot, right, heavener, it would be Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. First ballot, not even a question. Not even like, after a little while, he'll get in. This was like, oh, so that's one answer. One answer is, right, so we see how he showed up, but who knows what was inside. Maybe he knew something we didn't. But the Rebbe offers, amongst many different options, the Rebbe offers a very interesting, very unique take on this. And he says that, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived his life with complete bittul, which means that he did good, but he didn't think about it too much. He wasn't self-aware of like, oh, look at all the good that I'm doing. Look at this. Where's my award? Where's my certificate? Where's my gold star? Look, I did all this good stuff. Right? I should take credit for it. He never was the type of guy that thought too much about himself. He just showed up and did what was needed to be done, and then continued to the next step, to the next scenario, to the next opportunity to do what was needed to be done. He never paused and thought for a moment and kind of stood outside of himself to assess how he's doing. How am I doing today? How do I feel? How is my spiritual growth? How does that look? He never thought about that because he was so in the moment. He never thought about the moments. Does that make sense? He was always in it. And again, using the buzzword of today, bittul. He was filled with bittul through and through. It was never about him. So now, the Rebbe explains, comes the end of his life. And now he stands on the threshold of, the end of his time on earth. And now, for the first time, he thinks about himself. He says, well, wait a second. Where am I holding? Where do I rank? Right? Did I maximize my opportunities? We know the answer. He did. But he had never thought about it. Why didn't he think about it? Because he was never looking at himself. He was always looking out of himself. It's like the eyes. The eyes are amazing. The eyes are our window to the world. You know what's amazing about the eyes? They always face outside of ourselves. It's the mirror that makes us look at ourselves, right? It's the silver. It's the materialism that forces us to look at ourselves. Look at me. That's where the ego comes in. You take a piece of glass, you look through it, you look at it, you look through it, you look into the world, you put a piece of silver behind it. Aha, now I can see myself. It's the material focus that fuels the ego that makes us look at self. The eyes are always focused outside, on others, on Hashem, on the world, on the opportunities. Always selfless. The eyes are the seat of selflessness of the human being. It's always about looking at you. The eyes never look at self. If your eyes are looking at yourself, it means one of two things. Something's wrong, right? Uh-oh. Not even. That doesn't even explain that. That means a serious situation. Number one, I don't even know if that's possible. Or number two, it means that you've put up something fancy in front of yourself. And now you're looking not at what needs to be looked at. You're looking at what I want to look at. Look at me. Look at myself. Huh? I would imagine.
It's all introspective with people on it.
Maybe.
You don't see your body,
You don't see yourself, right? Yeah, you don't see yourself at all. That is, yeah. But I think there's something powerful about the eyes, that the eyes are literally designed by God. We have eyes, and eyes are always looking at the other. And yet, human beings say, thank you for the gift. Let me look at myself. It's like, and the selfie is the ultimate. It's the ultimate 21st century manifestation of what back in the day was called the mirror, right? Back in the day, you had to take a mirror, you take glass, you cover the back with gold or silver, bronze, copper, whatever. You had to put a metal back there. Metal's more expensive. Put a metal back there. Oh, now I can see what I look like. They say about a gvir, there was once a man who had started off his life not wealthy, very righteous person. God blessed him with wealth. He did a lot of good things. Somebody once walked into his house and he noticed his mirror was scratched in the back, scratched in a few places. He said to him, what's with the scratch in the mirror? 'Cause I'm sure he can afford a new mirror if the mirror got. He says, I always want to remember not to make it about myself, able to see through to the other side, to the other person, not to get lost in not to be consumed with my own self. How do I look? How do I feel? Me. Look, I'll just say this quickly, but we see the dangers of a society that is, or even a movement, a mindset, a life mindset of making it all about us. It doesn't help. it only makes us more meshuggah. It makes us a little bit crazier. When we think about self, it makes us more anxious. It makes us more sad. It creates negative emotions, self-obsession. It's like, oh, no, we're self-aware. We're looking at each other. Yeah, you want to go self-aware all the way? Okay, welcome. I mean, we know this. Some of the happiest times in our lives is when we're not living for ourselves, is when we're living for a cause, is when we're volunteering, is when we're giving, is when we're doing, is when our eyes are looked to the needs around us and not looking at ourselves, whether it's in the mirror or in the selfie, right? It's those moments of purpose that really give us true joy from the inside than those vain moments of, oh, look at me and look at how I look and look at what I'm doing. That's the stuff that maybe gives us a quick high, maybe a shot of, of excitement, of adrenaline, but ultimately creates a scenario where we just become too much self-focused. So the Rebbe says about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that at the end of his life, when he was crying and he said to his students, I don't know where I'm going to go. The reason is not because he wasn't righteous, not because he had some skeleton in his closet that no one knew about. It's because he had never looked in the mirror. In a good way, he had never looked in the mirror. He was always looking to what needs to be done. That is the personification of bittul. A person who is not in it for themselves, a person who is in it, meaning in everything and every moment, is about what needs to be done. Not what do I need to do, but what needs to be done. It's not about me. I think it was automatic. The way it sounds like it was automatic.
You don't see the path that you're on. You see the
Interesting.
images reflected.
It's flipped.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Along those lines, not only do we see a flipped image, I guess maybe I would call that distorted. In other words, you can't even, when we think we're seeing ourselves, we're not even seeing ourselves the way others see us. In other words, it's a distortion of the truth anyway. So the idea that we should focus incessantly on self, obviously, I think, for most of us, it is healthy to check in and say, how am I doing? How am I feeling, etc. But to make that to make that the forefront, to make that our why and wherefore, I don't know. I would humbly ask, let's not make any, declarations, but let's ask the question, is that healthy? Is that the healthiest? Because I don't know, maybe someone who's living a pure life, when I say pure, I don't mean like spirit, I mean just simple, pure, living every moment to do present, that's a great word, a present life in the moment, accomplishing what I need to get done. Maybe that is the key to a happy and successful life. Maybe. I would argue yes. I think this obsession with self is not so healthy. And so again, that is the theme today, the theme about bittul as opposed to ego. So along those lines, I want to jump inside our text because our text is talking about this individual that we're calling, look, the series is called Spiritual Surrender. This is the surrendered servant of God. This persona, and it's a state that we can all reach, maybe not 24/7, but at times a state of surrender where we go, thank you, where we make it not about us. Our spiritual work is not about us, but not about us, but about the work that needs to be done. And it is really, it's really profound and special. So let's jump in. We are on page, hold on. We are on page 52. Okay, we're on page 52. I'm going to pull this up on the Zoom so that everyone can see this. And we're going to spend the next 10 minutes reading and translating and explaining and exploring and discussing. It's a really beautiful text. I will caution you, as you know, there are some parts of this that do sound a little extreme and hardcore. He's describing a prototype. Obviously, no one lives as a prototype. No one fits into the perfect box of a prototype. By definition, a prototype is like the perfect prototype of something. He's describing the prototype of the surrendered servant, the person who is totally batel with bittul, totally not about him or herself and all about God doing what needs to be done. So let's start from the top. And I know we did this last week, the top of it, day and night, but I want to start again. I want to pick up, kind of get a running start into this text. So here we go. Let's jump in. Day and night. And just as with a physical servant, true servitude means that he is never idle. He's always serving his master and doing something that is connected to his master. So it is in the spiritual realm. In other words, with the spiritual servant. The Ol Malchut Shemayim, the yoke of heaven that is upon him, does not allow him to go about idly. It forces him to do a service constantly. In other words, this person is so surrendered that he doesn't take time off from surrender. In other words, it's not like, oh, for this 1 hour a day, I'm surrendered to God, but the rest, it's all about me, 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 me. I mean, that's possible that a person could live like that, but that's not the persona that he's talking about. Again, we're on page 52, middle of the first paragraph at the top. And although it is a yoke for him and he does not truly desire it, the Ol Malchut Shemayim that is upon him forces him to do so and gives him the sense that it cannot be any other way, God forbid. In other words, based on ego, what would his ego want to do? I don't know. Go out and play some arcades. But it's not about him. It's not about what do I want to do today? What do I want to do today? I don't know. But it's what needs to be done today. It's what I am needed. It's what is needed of me to be done. Right? I mentioned this recently in a class. JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Right? It's not about what I need. It's about what I'm needed for. Straight up. It's what I am needed for. This persona, this surrendered servant of God is always in that state, constantly in that state of what is needed of me. Not about me, what is needed of me. Also at night, he will not rest with sleep, but rather will awake from his sleep and engage in Torah study, your songs, and praises of God by reciting psalms and the like. And even while sleeping, the Ol Malchut Shemayim is upon him, causing him to ensure that his sleep should be proper and that the way he lays accords with Jewish laws, that he should not create a stumbling block, God forbid. In other words, when you go to sleep at night, you say Shema, and Shema is not just one prayer. It's like a few pages of prayers in the Siddur. You say the bedtime Shema. You forgive before you go to sleep. There's a paragraph that says, "I hereby forgive anyone who has harmed me or vexed me or done anything wrong to me. I hereby forgive." You let go before you go to sleep. Don't carry baggage into your sleep. And you pray. The last thing you say before you fall asleep, the last thing you say is, may God ensure that my sleep be good and the proper and right way. I shall wake up in a healthy way, etc. He also wakens himself at the necessary time, whether it is for actual protection and precaution or in order to do his work. In other words, making sure that he doesn't sleep in and violate, let's say, and miss the time to say Shema in the morning or to get to the work that he needs to do, the spiritual work. He wakes up. In other words, being a servant of God, being someone who's filled with bittul, someone who is batul to Hashem, someone who is all in it for God, is not a part-time job for this person. Again, this is the prototype. The prototype is someone who is constantly in that space of what am I needed for? Let's continue. And now we talk about subduing desires, because the fact that he is a servant doesn't mean that the person doesn't have any negative desires inside. But what it means is that when that ego presents, the person is able to push it down and subdue it. Let's go. Let's read this inside. Similarly, here's the new text. He subdues himself in regard to all physical pleasures and conquers the spirit of his craving, even though it is very much against his nature to give up something to which he has drawn his soul. In other words, the person by nature loves what he loves, has a strong ego. But again, the surrendered servant, this warrior that we're speaking of, has the ability to feel that and to push it down and to reject it. Nevertheless, he nullifies his will. By the way, the Hebrew word for nullifies is mevatel, which is batel, right? He says, he nullifies his will and nature by forcing himself to refrain from doing that which is contrary to the divine will. So he exercises that self-control. That self-control is powerful because it's not just about self-control. It's really about keeping the ego in check. I still have an ego, but I'm not going to let the ego take over in this moment. I am going to be the master of my ego. Again, I still have an ego, but I'm going to make sure that I am in control and not the other way around. Again, using a visual example that I've used in other classes before, it's like, are you walking the dog or is the dog walking you? Right? Kelev, kulei lev. It's emotion, it's ego. Right? It's very hot and excited. But here's the question. Are you guiding it or is it guiding you? You tell your ego, thank you very much, not now. And by the way, keeping your ego in check, even when it's not an evil or a wrong, is profoundly healthy. In other words, it's about maintaining self-control, discipline. One of the reasons why, that's been offered as to why kosher is a thing. Why kosher? Why kosher? Now we know ultimately it's because God said it's the Sinai diet. It's God's diet. So that's it. It's good for the soul without any qualifications. It's good for the soul. But there's another idea. But even if it's good for the soul, it could also be good for the body. And here's how. If a person can maintain self-control on their dinner plate, it's a great litmus test for overall self-control in life. If I can say when it comes to food, this yes, this no, even if it's kosher, but I had meat. Now I want a piece of cheese. Nope, I'm going to wait 6 hours, whatever, different customs, 3 hours, 6 hours. Right? I'm going to wait. That discipline is profoundly healthy. You're saying to your own ego, take it easy. I know you're very excited. Oh, I need it. I have to have it. Do you really need it? You really need it? Is it a must? Come on, take it easy. You're going to survive. We'll survive together. You put your arm around your ego. Say, come, let's listen to some music. Let's read a book, right? Let's take a walk. Let's take a hike, right? Hit the road, Jack. What you tell your ego, you start, I'll catch up. What, yeah, you move it along.
Share the story about this a few weeks.
Which one?
Yeshiva being ready.
Oh yeah, for the break fast. Oh, after a long day, it's a summer fast. Fast ended probably 9:30. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Who's in control? Right? Remember that show, Who's the Boss? Remember that show? From back in the day, Who's the Boss? That's our question. Who's the boss? Who's in control? Who's in control? The ego? Not for this spiritual, not for this surrendered servant. Ego is not in charge. The person is in charge. They have the ability to quell, to quash the ego. Let's read the parentheses, bottom of 52. The actual subduing of his desire is not so difficult for him, since the Kabbalah assists him. In other words, this person has surrendered to God, so the individual moments are not that challenging. For it causes him to fear doing, God forbid, anything that is against the divine will. This is especially true since his acceptance of servitude is in such a way that he's no longer being for himself at all. In other words, he's not living a self-oriented life. It is therefore not difficult for him to nullify his desire and put himself to the side. In other words, he has chosen a life of servitude. If you think about it's easier to understand the physical example. A person who is a servant of the king, that's become their persona. That's their definition. Who are you? I'm a servant of the king. So already, like, you're in that state of this is who I am and what I do. So yes, is on the ground in the moment, would you rather be doing something else? Sure, but you're not recreating the wheel. You're just continuing what you have, what you've adopted. And the same thing is true for a spiritual servant. Let's turn the page, please, to 54. Yes. So different.
What?
So different.
Well, I was exactly, maybe obviously, in
Oh.
the sense that people do give themselves over, especially work, right? Like
Interesting.
generally, I would say like, let's see, what is our, let's say, what are we serving? People serve their boss or whatever their work they're doing, that's their servitude. They're serving that mission, that work mission. They have a boss and they have hours of work, and then they spend extra hours. Most Jews are nuts. They're off at 5, they go say 6, 7, 8. They stay late, and you're serving. You're a servant, and you're giving yourself over to this
Surrender.
that you're surrendering to this
Powerful.
in a certain way. And so this is, so here we're talking about serving.
But a higher power.
Yeah, but different masters. It's like there's another master here.
Can I repeat what you're saying? Because I think it's. I want to repeat it so everyone online can hear it. But David, what Reb David is saying is that maybe this is not as foreign as we think. To God it might be foreign, but the concept of surrender and servitude. Think about how we look at work and how we're dedicated, and we go overtime, and we're so passionate about, or I don't know if passionate is the right word, but we're so into the work that it's like we're invested. We kind of surrender to the late hours and the long hours and the work, and it consumes us. So it goes on. And you're right. I think it's a perfect parallel because think about it. Day and night, he made sure to say, can't sleep well at night because you're thinking about all the stuff that needs to get done, all the work. You wake up in the middle of the night and you send out another email. You write down an idea that you have. You wake up at night, but he used the example of you wake up at night and say something to him. And we're thinking, who does that? That's crazy. You know who does that? You know who does that? Someone who is as into God as someone else is into work. We call this a Godaholic.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Said no one ever.
Stop.
Oh,
Hey, oh. Hey, no, you don't, this is not you. This is what you do for a living, you have to do this, but you can get away from it. You don't have to live that way.
That's like having a master during the week, and then.
Gives you the weekend off.
Out of it, you know.
Man, you don't have to hate your job.
The other job is the same way. All the jobs are some master.
Look, I think you, yeah.
And that is the when you say serving God, and I think this is something I want to put out and see if everyone relates to this, but you know, God is a very abstract word. But the Tanya makes it very clear, what does it mean to serve God? It means Torah and mitzvahs, specifically the Torah. The Evangelist Peace is only going to get free through Torah and mitzvahs. So that's why when he gets up in the night, what does he do? He says to him.
Studies, right?
So serving God means Torah and mitzvahs. It's not like some, well, you know, I'll just serve this master and that would be like serving God.
Right.
No.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good. So again, I want to repeat that. So Reb David is saying again, just very clearly and succinctly, he's saying that the idea that we can, number one, we can relate to this concept, go see it in work. Even though when it comes to physical work, we have Shabbos. So it's not, it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect parallel because God would be at 24/7, 365 as it were, or 354, depending on how you lunar. Shabbos is even more in the divine employ without the other stuff. But either way, the point is, well, I think we have a bit of, we can wrap our heads around the concept. You know, I think maybe this is what, you know, he used the example of a servant of a king. And maybe for us, kings and servants, I don't know, what do we know from kings and servants? But maybe we know about, working in our context. And then the second idea is that spiritual service is not some nebulous concept, but it's Torah. Let's finish this off, and then we're going to close it out. Let's do the top, 54 at the top. He will also try to weaken the power of evil that is in his heart by working hard with his mind and heart in prayer to nullify any foreign desire. Again, he talks about a Jewish activity, which is he utilizes tefillah. He utilizes prayer to subdue the ego and any negative forces. Prayer is a powerful antidote to the force of negativity. And in the parentheses, we must say that he does not achieve this by awakening actual love and fear of God, since this would place him in the category of the loving servant, but by contemplating divine concepts so that the fear of God will be upon him, etc. And additionally, we must say that this contemplation is not true contemplation from the depths of the mind, etc. So he's saying that this person, again, we're trying to speak about a specific person, somebody who is surrendered, but not someone who's loving every moment of it. Because loving every moment of it is actually undoing the surrender. Because now it's not about who I'm surrendering to, it's that I like doing this. So he's saying that this person who's meditating on God is not to the point where he loves now waking up in the middle of the night. He still feels like the yoke of doing it, but it's something I have to do. It's something I have to. It's a very specific person he's speaking of. Someone who's so dedicated, but is dedicated in the context of dedication and not from, I'm excited to do it. Not that that's bad if you're excited, but if you're excited to do it, then are you dedicated or are you excited? There's two different things. Are you surrendered or are you excited? It's not exactly the same thing. Surrendered means even when you're not excited about it. So it's somebody who's not so excited about it, but is still surrendered to the cause. Let's do one more paragraph and we'll close out. He also endeavors to constrain the spirit of a desire, even in thought and speech, not just in action, but even in his head and even in his words, he makes sure to keep that kosher. He does so again because of the old Malchut Shemayim, the yoke of heaven that he accepted upon himself to prevent him from engaging in evil and actual deed, at least. It also forces him to engage in divine service in the realm of do good, i.e. in prayer, Torah, and mitzvot, and tzedakah, etc. Exactly as Rav David said a moment ago, it's practical Torah and mitzvot activities. I do want to do, let's do 3 more paragraphs. Give me 60 seconds. He does so even though the work is heavy upon him, i.e. the general service, and his breath is short because of his toil, since he does not find pleasure and delight in his work. It's not about being excited about it. It's about commitment. For he does everything by force and coercion, and he is constantly in a state of nullifying his will and self-constriction, denying himself any expression of self. He does not find any value for himself, since he does not possess any great stature from any type of revelation of light. All he has is the actual deed, and even that is experienced in a state of self-coercion. Self-coercion sounds not good, but what it means here is that he's surrendered and he is investing himself into something even when he doesn't get any benefit out of it. The general thrust of his worship is that he's acting for the honor of his master. It's all about God. And even if he fulfills everything properly, he takes no pride in it. It's not about him feeling good with his ego, since after all, he's required to do so because of his servitude. And to a loyal servant, self-congratulation is completely foreign. Again, he is a servant. It never makes it about himself. It's always about the cause. What is needed to be done? What does God need from me? What do others need from me? It's not about self. It's not like, oh, look at what I've done. Look at what we've done. This is a great, no mirror. It's only eyes pointed outward. Furthermore, all that he possesses belongs to his master, as explained elsewhere with the example of the servant who crafts a very beautiful vessel. And the praise and honor goes to, page 56, the master. The servant receives no credit for it, etc. shall be explained. So that he doesn't explain at length. But the point is that not only does he not take any congratulations from what he does, but even when he accomplishes his work, he doesn't reflect on it and say, oh, look what I did. Isn't this amazing? He doesn't receive anything from the work. He's all about giving. Now, you could say this sounds like, what kind of life is this? This is the surrendered life. This is a life of surrender, and surrender to a higher power. Surrender literally to a higher power, to something greater than self. And there's nothing greater than being surrendered to something greater than self. Because you know what the alternative is? Worshiping ourselves. Is that really worth worshiping? This, with all of our flaws and our frailties and our doubts and our challenges, that we should serve this, or we should serve something greater than self? I think the choice is clear. Vote God 2024. No, so the point is like this, right? The point is, the surrendered servant is someone who moves out. What is that noise? I'm sure we're safe. Someone who moves outside themselves, someone who is not making it about themselves, someone who's surrendered. I think the work example is a good example. Someone who's so dedicated to work day and night. I want to do something. It's not about me. I'm traveling for work. Now that might be one might judge that as an unhealthy expression of this, but the point is we have the capacity to do this. We can channel in a healthy way, which is vis-a-vis God, Torah, and mitzvot, to do the things that we need to do to be that servant of God. And that brings us into more connection with what our true purpose is, which is to be a spiritual warrior here on this earth. So my charge for this week, thank you, Jacqueline. Glad you could join today. So my charge for this week is all of us, again, I think we did this last week as well, but we're being consistent. Find something this week, a Jewish area, something in the realm of Torah study or prayer or mitzvah, doing a mitzvah, and have that experience in what we would call a spiritually surrendered way, where it's not about you. It's not about, oh, I enjoy studying this. Find something that you're doing for God or you're doing for someone else. A mitzvah, you're volunteering, you're helping out, you're doing a mitzvah, you're wrapping tefillin, not because I like it, I enjoy it, I get to talk about it, but just because I'm doing it for God. Do something for God. It's the one thing that we haven't tried. Not we haven't tried, but we haven't told people. You want to feel better? Do something for someone else. We can put mirrors up to our heads, 24/7. It's not going to make us feel better. It's not going to make us feel less anxious. The one thing to do is take away the mirrors. Do something for something greater than self. All right. Thank you for joining me for this Kabbalah Café session. Hope you enjoyed it. I love the conversation. I love the dialogue. Let's keep it going next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Shavua tov, everyone. All right.